Good day. There was some high drama theatre rally on Friday afternoon in the corporate area related to the still undetermined billions of dollars defrauded at Stocks and Securities Ltd, SSL. Hello, this is the 55th episode of the Frankly Speaking Jamaica podcast. Please like, share and subscribe. We welcome your comments on the channel too. The theatre I speak about was with police officers swooping down, journalists like that phrase, swooping down on an upscale St. Andrew apartment complex where Jean Ann Panton lived. She does not own the complex or apartment where she lived. A phalanx of police, many in plain clothes and others in uniform, arrived in a convoy of urgency. Some wore balaclavas and most were carrying heavy firepower. It was not a terrorist alarm or a hideout of a dangerous fugitive. The police were there to retrieve documents and equipment that could assist in the very serious probe now taking place about what has been described as fraud of an unprecedented scale in Jamaica's financial sector. It was theatre of the absurd, frankly speaking. It need not have been like this. There was not a scintilla of suggestion that the place would have been surrounded by collaborators or men toting M16s, or that there would have been any resistance to entering Miss Panton's unfortified apartment. Frankly speaking, all that was needed was for fewer than a handful of police officers to enter the place and remove all the documents and equipment that may or may not be helpful. And frankly speaking, that should have taken place with a search warrant more than 10 days before it did. Soon after, Miss Panton reportedly signed confessing she stole some of the money. Now, let's make this plain, frankly speaking. The administration, the government, must be seen to be doing something. After all, this is an international story. But no one at Bloomberg or CBS or the BBC will be distracted by the theatre, nor should we. What is needed is for the continued measured statement of officials, including the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, in the face of swirling, damning rumors. But more is needed. We can all agree that Jamaica has a sound financial system. Yes, there's fraud from time to time. Yes, the service is pretty nasty in some places. And the fees extortionate in some cases. But the system is sound, largely. But there are some distressing issues here still. And I have bounced my thoughts off some highly respected financial journalists, some of them not practicing today. So, we don't know how much money has gone missing at SSL. We know it's at least in the teens of millions in US dollars, nearly 13 of which belonged to Usain Bolt. We don't know how many other people, aside from the self-implicated Miss Panton, are involved. We know they need not all have been employed there either. We gather that it is unlikely that the 40 or more people who lost billions will recover much, if any, of the funds. We don't even know what the SSL did from 2017 when red flags started popping. There is information that its liabilities were huge compared to its assets. And we don't know why they didn't do more. We don't know how much the SSL board knew and when and what they did. Now, what did the Fiscal Services Commission, FSC, do? That's the regulatory body. We know, of course, that the CEO of the FSC Everton McFarlane has resigned after a disastrous press conference. We haven't heard if the board is to go too. We know too that an audit ought to be done to help provide some information and some clarity, and we know that ought to be done swiftly. The finance minister is to give what is being called a policy statement on Monday. More than that is needed. Now here's what a colleague of mine, Andrew Clunis, writing on the Jamaica Times website, says in anticipating Dr. Nigel Clarke's scheduled Monday address on the matter. Clunis said this: between Dr. Clarke and Prime Minister Andrew Holness, they must embark on disemboweling the Jamaican financial sector and put it through a period of convalescence. Well, frankly speaking, that's strong. I'm not so sure that the sector is that bad in spite of SSL, but we ought to know the facts. Here now is Desmond Richards.
Is it possible that the government could be called on to bail out depositors at the scandal hit Stocks and Securities Ltd? Is it possible? Let me remind listeners and viewers that Fiscal Services Commission, that is the state regulation agency, in its 2018 report found that SSL was on a path of insolvency. And based on all the reports, nothing has happened since to change that course. So, where is it going to find money, nearly $3 billion, to pay depositors whose funds have been stolen? The international media had a field day reporting the incident because sprint legend Usain Bolt is one of the victims. So that is a dose of bad publicity for the country. But there are some questions. What did the state regulator did to protect depositors from what has happened? And how is it possible for one employee to steal over 90 million from depositors' account without the management knowledge? These are questions which deserve some answers. And the resignation of the general manager is not enough. You will recall the Prime Minister told the nation that he got a loan from that agency, which was used as part of his construction costs for his mansion at Beverly Hills. Now, SSL is not a loan agency. So, how did the Prime Minister get a loan? These are questions that must be answered. Now, we will recall that taxpayers were forced to fork out over 140 billion in the 1990s to bail out financial institutions which were finsacked. Now, taxpayers' money cannot be used to bail out this private institution. So, this has left a very pertinent question. How are the depositors going to be repaid? How is it? Are they going to lose millions of dollars that they put aside as their savings? How is this going to work out? And the government has some responsibilities in this situation. Let us see and hear what the finance minister and the prime minister is going to say in the coming weeks. What solutions are they going to come up with to address these issues?
That's Desmond Richards, journalist and founder of internet radio, Rebel Radio Jamaica. And now to Krystal Cameron.
I'm not a Jamaican, but I have been to Jamaica. I operated a business down there. I used to also work with a few Jamaicans. There were two Jamaicans that I worked with. One of them was from Mandeville, one was from Kingston. The one from Mandeville, she came over to South Florida back in, I think, the mid-70s sometimes. The other Jamaican came over sometime in the early 90s, and there was a difference in their personality, in their personas, in the way that they carried themselves, in the way that they spoke. It dawned on me that in the mid-70s, when Michael Manley was still Prime Minister of Jamaica, thought he was going to go ahead and steer the country towards communism because of his friendship with Fidel Castro. They got scared. They voiced their opinions or voiced their concerns, to which Michael Manley, I'm paraphrasing here, basically told them there are 4 flights to Miami every day. Take one. And a lot of them took that up, and they left and they moved to the South Florida area. There were doctors, there were lawyers, there were nurses, and so forth. These are your more privileged Jamaicans, your more educated, upper crust Jamaicans, and so forth, people with money. A few years later, over 900 people were killed in the 1980 elections. A lot of Jamaicans fled to South Florida, but a lot of them who fled were people that came from the garrison areas, the rougher areas of Jamaica, the Tivoli Gardens, the Trench Town, the Rima. So they tend to be a little bit more louder, a little bit more rambunctious. They settle more in the regular everyday neighborhoods. So you start hearing the reggae music, you start smelling the weed, and they carry themselves with a certain flamboyance. Those are the Jamaicans who push the Jamaican culture forward.
That story is a glimpse into Jamaica's past, and I do think that history has a way of repeating itself, usually because it shows an establishment of trends. Jamaica has many opportunities: geographic location, agricultural capability of the land, a recognizability brought to us by Bob Marley and Usain Bolt and even the Shower Posse. With all that potential, possibilities would seem nearly limitless. However, possibilities are limited because, again, a country is its people as well as its natural resources. The issue at the root is the cutting away of a significant portion of Jamaica's body due to the higher class, managerial and business owning class migrating within such a short period. That wasn't merely a wound, it was a cutting off of a part of the Jamaican body that's cast shadows into our present, and I believe will continue to cast shadows into our future. All this potential, but ultimately, unless something happens that brings the majority of people in the diaspora back to Jamaica, because as I've said before, I think we've reached a critical mass, a loss of morals, even more people seem unhinged, and the world is about to go into what could be a very tumultuous age of energy, fertilizer and food insecurity. I'd like to think that at some point in the future Jamaica might have nuclear energy, because we need to jump that hurdle of cheap energy in order to become a more productive country. It's a pity that in my farewell to you I can't put down something more optimistic, but frankly at the core there needs to be such a huge change in terms of the mindset of Jamaican people and the reduction of the reprobate behavior that makes it so hard for us to trust each other in our society. But do I see it happening? No. Do I want to be around to watch this steady decline of the morals, of the families, of the children, of the government, of the currency? No. The more I think about the purpose of life, the more I think about what other purpose could there be to life except life itself. Life is the point of life, and making new life, leaving my mark on the future through my children. The more it dawns on me that at the core is my purpose on this earth, the more I think, how can I do that to the best of my ability? And the freeing thing that I've admitted to myself is that I don't think I can do it here.
That's Krystal Cameron, CEO and creative. Endgame. I received a lot of feedback to the commentary last week on the nasty state of public center conveniences and the question of how to treat business places ill-equipped or unwilling to deal with emergencies of their customers. If you hear of any action to be taken on that in the next 10 years or so, please tell me. That's it for this episode of Frankly Speaking Jamaica podcast. Please remember to subscribe and share with your friends. Until then, on behalf of Desmond Richards and Krystal Cameron, I'm Franklin McKnight.